Somewhere in your first 2 years of life, something happened to you for the very first time. You laughed, you tasted food, you heard your own name. You will never remember any of it. Not because it wasn't important, not because your brain was broken. The real answer is far stranger than that. Think about it for a second. You can recall your 10th birthday. You can recall a fight from last week. But the day you took your first step? Gone. The first time you saw snow? Gone. Somewhere around age 3 or 4, a curtain drops, and everything before it disappears. Scientists have a name for this. They call it infantile amnesia. And for over 100 years, nobody could fully explain it. Sigmund Freud noticed it first, back in the early 1900s. He assumed the memories were still in there somewhere. Buried, repressed, hidden away because they were too disturbing to face. It sounded dramatic. It sounded almost poetic. It was also completely wrong. Here's what your brain was actually doing instead. A baby's brain is not a smaller, simpler version of yours. It is under construction, every single day. The hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for stitching moments into long-term memories, is one of the last regions to fully mature. Researcher Patricia Bauer, who has spent decades studying memory development in children, found something remarkable. Babies and toddlers can absolutely form memories. They just can't hold on to them for long. A 1-year-old might remember an event for a few weeks. A 2-year-old, a few months. But the storage system itself is still being wired, shelf by shelf, and early memories often get lost in the renovation. But here's where it gets stranger. Memory researcher Carolyn Rovee-Collier ran a now famous series of experiments with infants and mobiles. She tied a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging above the crib. The babies quickly learned that kicking made the mobile move. Weeks later, without the ribbon attached, she brought the babies back. The moment they saw that same mobile, their little legs started kicking again. The memory was there. It just needed the exact right cue to resurface. Which raises an unsettling question. How many of your earliest memories are still sitting somewhere in your brain, waiting for a trigger that will never come? There's a second piece to this puzzle, and it involves something you'd never expect. New brain cells. Neuroscientist Paul Frankland, working with young mice, discovered that the infant brain produces new neurons in the hippocampus at an extraordinary rate. This process is called neurogenesis. It sounds like a good thing. Growth usually is. But Frankland found that this flood of new neurons actually disrupts existing memory circuits. Imagine trying to keep a filing cabinet organized while someone keeps shoving in new drawers. The old files get pushed out, overwritten, scrambled beyond recovery. Your brain, in its earliest years, was rebuilding itself so fast that it couldn't keep last month's memories intact. So why would evolution design a brain that erases its own early memories? Wouldn't it make more sense to remember everything? Not necessarily. A baby's job isn't to remember. A baby's job is to learn language, learn movement, learn how faces work, how gravity works, how to trust the people feeding and holding it. That kind of learning requires massive structural change, and structural change comes at a cost. Your brain, quite literally, sacrificed a personal photo album in exchange for the operating system you use every single day. The trade felt worth it. You just weren't around yet to agree to the deal. There's also the matter of language itself. Psychologist Nora Newcomb found something interesting when comparing children's memories to their vocabulary. A memory isn't just an image, it's a story. And to store an event as something you can retrieve later, you often need words to anchor it. A birthday party, a trip to the beach, a scary dog. Without language to label the experience, the moment can happen fully, vividly, emotionally, and still slip away because there was no verbal hook to hang it on. Toddlers are drowning in sensation with barely a vocabulary to catch any of it. Think about how strange this actually is. You didn't lose your first steps because they weren't dramatic enough. You didn't lose your first taste of chocolate because it wasn't intense enough. In many ways, those early experiences were more vivid than anything you feel today. Your nervous system was brand new. Every sensation hit at full volume. Colors were unfamiliar, sounds were unfamiliar. Your own hands were unfamiliar. And still, none of it stuck. The intensity of an experience, it turns out, has almost nothing to do with whether your brain decides to keep it. There's a sense of self involved here too. Psychologists studying the emergence of autobiographical memory point to something called the cognitive self. Before a certain age, a child doesn't yet have a stable internal narrator, a consistent me who experiences events and files them away as my story. Around age 3 or 4, that narrator starts to solidify. You begin to understand that you are a continuous person who exists across time, not just a series of disconnected present moments. Only once that narrator exists does your brain start reliably tagging memories as belonging to a coherent life story. Before that point, events happened, but there was no stable you yet to claim ownership of them. Here's the twist most people never consider. Infantile amnesia doesn't happen all at once, like a switch flipping off. It fades gradually, like a photograph left in the sun. Ask a 4-year-old what happened 2 years ago, and they'll actually remember quite a bit. Ask that same person the same question at age 8, and huge chunks are already missing. The memories aren't erased at 3. They're slowly bleached out over years, event by event, as the growing brain keeps reorganizing its own furniture. Culture plays a role too, and it's one of the more surprising findings in this entire field. Researchers comparing memory recall across different countries found that adults from cultures with a strong emphasis on individual storytelling, talking through the day, narrating feelings, asking children, and then what happened, tend to report earlier childhood memories than adults from cultures that emphasize group experience over individual narrative. The actual biology of the hippocampus doesn't change from country to country, but how early a memory gets locked in seems to depend, at least partly, on how often someone helps a child turn a moment into a sentence. Memory, in other words, isn't just something that happens to you. It's something that gets built, sometimes with help from the people around you. So what does this have to do with you? Right now, today? Everything, actually. Because the exact same mechanism that erased your earliest years is still shaping what you remember from last month. Your brain is not a camera. It never was. It's an editor, constantly deciding what's worth the storage cost, what deserves reinforcement, what gets quietly deleted while you sleep. The birthday party you can't recall from age 2 isn't fundamentally different from the ordinary Tuesday you already can't recall from last year. Your brain made the same call both times. Not important enough to keep, which means somewhere in your adult life, right now, you are living moments that will vanish the same way. Not because they don't matter to you today, but because your brain is still running the same ruthless filing system it built when you were a baby, just with better handwriting. There's a strange practical side effect of all this that shows up in courtrooms, of all places. Memory researcher Elizabeth Loftus spent decades demonstrating just how unreliable adult memory can be, let alone memory from early childhood. People have confidently described memories from age 2 or 3 that were later proven, through dates and documentation, to be flat impossible. What happened instead is something psychologists call a constructed memory. A parent tells the story enough times, a photo gets looked at enough times, and your brain, always the editor, stitches together a plausible scene and files it as a genuine memory, complete with a felt sense of certainty. You didn't lie. You didn't even choose to do it. Your brain simply preferred a complete story over an honest blank, which means some of what you think you remember from being very young probably isn't a memory at all. It's a memory of a story someone told you, dressed up to look like the real thing, and you have no reliable way from the inside to tell the difference. Consider what that means for the photos on your phone, the videos your parents took of you as a toddler, laughing at something you'll never understand, reaching for someone you'll never remember reaching for. You watch that footage now and feel a strange disconnect. That was you. And also, somehow, it wasn't. You have no internal claim to that moment. No felt memory to match the image. You are watching a stranger who happens to share your face, your name, and every single atom of the person eventually built from that beginning. It's worth pausing on why this even matters beyond curiosity. Understanding infantile amnesia has changed how psychologists think about trauma, attachment, and even parenting itself. If a child can't consciously recall an event from age 2, does that mean the event left no mark? Researchers now generally agree the answer is no. The hippocampus may forget the details, but other, older parts of the brain, the ones responsible for emotional response and stress regulation, mature much earlier and can absolutely encode the feeling of an experience, even without a matching narrative memory. This is why some adults carry an unexplained unease around certain sounds, smells, or situations with no memory attached to explain it. The story is gone. The feeling was never filed under a name. It just stayed. There's a comforting way to look at this if you let there be. Every relationship you don't remember forming, every hand that held yours before you could ask whose it was, every voice that sang to you before you understood a single word, still shaped you. The forgetting doesn't erase the effect. It only erases the footage. The love was still absorbed into the architecture, even if the architecture itself doesn't remember being built. In a strange way, some of the most important years of your life are also the years you'll never be able to consciously thank anyone for. And maybe that's not a loss. Maybe that's the whole point. A brain that remembered everything would drown under its own weight. Forgetting isn't a malfunction. It's maintenance. The you sitting here right now exists because an earlier version of you was quietly, efficiently erased to make room for who you'd eventually become. Every version of yourself you've outgrown, the toddler, the anxious 10-year-old, even the person you were last year, gets filed the same way, edited down until only the parts that shaped you remain accessible, and the rest dissolves quietly in the background. Somewhere in your first 2 years of life, something happened to you for the very first time. You will never remember it. And now you finally know why that was never a mistake. It was the price of becoming you.